Founders of Alexandria. By Star Scribe. Part 3. Moriah. Chapter 4. Whenever Moriah wanted to be alone, she wouldn't fly. She didn't want to contaminate her favorite activity with the stains of frequent despair. No, whenever Moriah was taken with such moods, she took to the forest. Illinois had long lost its largest forests before encroaching humans and their farms. Some trees had been permitted to remain, however, and some of those were by the country club. With her car parked on an empty road, Moriah could wander into the trees and expect to be left alone as long as she needed to. Rarely was she as disturbed as she was now. What was worse, she knew she had nobody to blame but herself. Like most of what caused her to feel this way. Ever since the event, she was often brought to wonder if it was even worth it to keep living every morning. She spent many nights reminding herself of the pleasures of life. Yet in the morning, she always woke up feeling even more disgusted with herself than before. Only in the trees could she forget herself. As she stumbled down familiar trails, she wept openly, not worried that anyone might find her here. Nobody had ever tried to follow her on these trips. Why should they start now? She found the natural smells far more soothing than she ever had when she was human, before the equestrian spell had taken a life she only tolerated and replaced it with one she actively loathed. There was little sympathy to be gained from the trees. Sometimes she took a hatchet, and threw it with her mouth into the bark of a tree. It was dangerous enough that she enjoyed the thrill, sometimes wishing she would steer it wrong and cut herself somewhere fatal along the way. Sometimes she just kicked things, destroying bushes and small trees with hooves far sturdier than human hands had ever been. Sometimes, if she was feeling really daring, she would try a spell. She had set a part of the forest on fire with that one once, though it'd been small enough that she had been able to contain it. Even in her rage, she brought a fire extinguisher these days whenever she wanted to try magic for relief. None of her usual techniques brought her relief today, though. Of course, they wouldn't work, she practically shouted, banging her hooves against a tree. Nothing much happened, except the little shock of impact up her leg, making everything a little wobbly for a few moments. Of course it'd be you. She tried to make her next kick even louder, tried to make it bring more pain. It did, but it didn't help. She still felt terrified. You knew this could happen and it didn't stop you. You knew this could happen. She briefly considered everything that was going to happen now, advancing rapidly through the chain of reasoning. Moriah was pregnant, she was certain of it. Not just missing one of those positively infuriating cycles of hers, though it was certainly that. Not just the nausea she had started to feel in the mornings, following her through the day and resurging in force whenever she smelled anything cooking. No. The greatest insult of all was that the thing she had actually wanted to master, magic, had begun to cooperate with her only with her internal environment. Moriah could barely sense the so-called thaumic field that made all magic possible, couldn't sense the supposed radiation that flowed from all living things and had driven her species extinct. Yet even without the prosthetic horn, it took her only a slight moment of concentration to sense the energy coming from within her own body, similar but distinct from her own. The thing couldn't be more than a complex ball of cells, right? How could she sense it already? There was so much she had failed to fully process, so much that became clear once she had realized what she was feeling from within herself. Thaumic radiation was a soft thing, like invisible ripples in a pond. She couldn't see them now, but she could feel them as she moved through space. Her perceptions were woefully clumsy if what Joseph described was any guide. He could feel for dozens of meters all around, pinpoint the positions of living things and ponies in particular with his eyes closed. He could even tell when someone was emotional, though he couldn't pinpoint what emotion they were feeling. This last she knew only too well, which was why she came out here in the first place. Joseph knew when she was upset, and would try to comfort her with all the precision and care of a rock slide. What was worse, if she could sense the tiny life within herself, if she had been able to feel it for nearly a week now, though it had taken days to guess what it might be, she was fairly certain he would be able to feel it too. They would be parents. Moriah felt it with all the grim certainty of someone handed a terminal medical diagnosis. There could be no fighting, no escape. In a world without medical science, even a simple surgery might kill her. Not to mention it felt pretty stupid to try and keep their population down when what they desperately needed was as many people as possible to help rebuild. Even if everyone in this first wave of immigrants stayed, even if there were others, the idea of harming the child revolted her. Considerably more than the idea of harming herself, as paradoxical as that was. A pity insane urges didn't follow logical rules. Why had she come out here? What did she hope to accomplish? She couldn't answer. Not that anybody asked. Nobody knew. If anything, learning that Alex had endured something similar was almost worse. It reflected on Moriah herself, demonstrating clearly that it was possible to endure the indignity, and to thrive in it. Alex's success proved what a truly worthless human being Moriah was. Not even that, anymore, whispered a voice, deep inside. She heard it, and recognized the truth at once. Her only skill and passion, flying, would soon be out of reach. Soon she would be lucky if she could get an ultralight running, with as scarce as fuel would become. She would never fly a jet again, that was certain. Her one real passion, rotting away in tanks and fuel trucks all over the world. What supreme cruelty it would be, to have thousands of little aircraft all over, but none she could fly. Was the struggle of living really justified by the reward? Moriah considered this very seriously. It wasn't merely an academic argument. Unfortunately, she usually just went in circles. She had thought over the same points hundreds of times, but never had they been so personal. She was still considering them when she realized, rather abruptly, that she sensed 3 thermic fields nearby, not just the 2 that were her internal world. Her eyes shot open and she sat up on the ground, searching for the interloper. Had one of the colonists followed her? A complete stranger from the new colony? Or worse, someone she actually knew? No, as it turned out. They weren't even human. Her new magical sensitivity showed her where to look, and standing there was a deer. A buck, though his antlers were small and short, so he was either a juvenile or just not very healthy. Even so, the deer towered over her by what felt like at least 2 feet. He was larger, stronger, and probably faster too. Fear bubbled up from that same corner of her soul that whispered dark things to her at night. Yes, her life was truly without value. Her ultimate and most prominent fear, which hadn't even existed until the event, was about to be a reality. Of course this was what the universe had for her. It wasn't as though life wasn't plenty awful enough on its own. The deer approached, sniffing at her. She froze, as though a wasp had just landed on her nose, not daring so much as a shiver to either side for fear she would prompt retaliation. There wasn't any. After a few seconds of energetic sniffing, the deer retreated a pace or 2, meeting her eyes. Moriah had seen deer before, when hunting with her father. She had met their eyes in the moment before pulling the trigger, and it hadn't slowed her hand. She hadn't even felt bad about it, really. She was a sapient predator, they were subsapient prey. Something subtle had changed about the eyes. More than that though was the overwhelming evidence coming from where her horn had been. Evidence screaming to her that this subsapient prey was far more like her than he was different. I am sorry if I intruded. She took a breath, trying to steady her voice. I come here every few days. If I was imposing in your home, I didn't mean to. Silence. The creature seemed to be listening closely, watching her with more insight than any dog she had seen before the event. More even than Huan. As though he somehow knew he was hearing meaning, even if he lacked the concept of a language. Was she communicating with the cavemen of animals? While many animals seemed clever, it seemed Moriah had discovered something not even Alex had anticipated. The spell had apparently uplifted one of Earth's natural animal species. Unless, you used to be human. She completed her own internal dialogue out loud. Who was going to complain? The deer. You aren't human, are you? I get that being alone probably drove you crazy. Silence. The buck held himself still as she spoke, watching her mouth. As she watched, he even imitated, opening and closing his own mouth. The motions were at random however, and no sound emerged but those deer normally produce. Guess not. If you'd been human, you'd still know how to talk. All of us do, anyway. Unless your mouth can't make words anymore. She felt suddenly worried. Had she just found someone who had life even worse than she did? Not if you can understand me. Nothing. Not a tilt, not a gesture, the creature just stared. She sighed then, though she hadn't relaxed. Guess you must be like the cows. Sky talks like they're intelligent. Well, more intelligent than cows are supposed to be. You must be like that too now. She walked past the deer, feeling a little braver. He made no gesture to stop her, though she was conscious without even looking that he was following her. Deer were swift creatures, far too swift for her to get away if he wanted to stay with her. She didn't run, in case sudden movement might trigger an end to whatever strange fugue provoked his behavior in the first place. She kept talking all the way back to her car. He followed, silent all the while, looking, as much as any deer can, like he was taking what she had to say very seriously. She went back to her previous line of reasoning, with all her worry about what a terrible parent she was, how she had no desire to pass on her genes. The buck listened the way a good dog would listen, though he made no reply. Eventually she reached the edge of the wood, where trees faded into a winding country road. She walked over to her car and found he would follow no more. He watched as she climbed up inside, and continued to watch as she started the car and switched on her radio again. Joseph's panicked voice came to her over the radio. "Yeah. Moriah, say something." She reached down, depressing the transmit button with the edge of one hoof. "I'm here." "What is it?" "Thank God." She could feel the relief in his voice like a physical weight. "We've been trying to reach you for over an hour, Moriah." "What is it?" She looked to the horizon, but didn't see any smoke coming from the direction of town proper, or any other direction, for that matter. She left the radio in her lap, driving past the watching deer into a loop that would take her back to Alexandria. Alex's voice came in over the radio. "Moriah, something happened in Philadelphia. HPI noticed it during their most recent satellite scan, apparently it's the strongest thermic field they ever measured. It's fading. We have to get there. We need you to fly us there immediately." Moriah's knee slammed into the brake knob hanging from the wheel, and she nearly skidded off the road. She coughed several times. "You want me to fly somebody to Philadelphia?" "4 of us, actually. You, me, Joseph, and Oliver. Satellite shows signs of ponies living there recently. Apparently there was some kind of explosion, and some stuff is still on fire. There could be injured in the city somewhere." She started driving again, cautiously. "It won't be very fast, Alex. The Learjet is still parked in Indianapolis. That's hours to drive, more hours to test the fuel and run our pre-flight checks, hoping to God I can manage the weather. Too slow. At the rate the thermic field is fading, it might be gone in 6 hours. Any hope we have of getting Joseph there and identifying it depends on getting there before then. Not to mention any pony who might be injured. We're going to take the Hummingbird. We're already waiting there, and you remember where I parked it. I need you to drive out and meet us here. No time to grab supplies. Alex," she took a deep breath, trying not to sound patronizing. Then she realized the effort was futile, and tried to sound as patronizing as possible. "We've had the Hummingbird for 3 days. I've spent a few hours playing with its simulator. Asking me to fly it now is beyond suicide. I'm not even convinced a pony could fly it without hands for all those controls. If you want to die, a fuel bomb would be much easier." Alex wasn't amused. They're going to fly it remotely, Moriah. You're only there in case there's some kind of emergency, but we still need you. Please Moriah. Joseph's voice again. Ponies could be hurt. Adrian said there is a big group in Philadelphia, maybe bigger than ours. They might need our help. Alex wasn't enough to convince her. Alex she would have happily told to shove it. Not Joseph, though. It's certain death if I ever have to fly it, she said. But there's no way I'd let you take anything that beautiful without me. Give me 10.